So now I would like to welcome on stage Dr. Adriana Marais. She's going to talk to us about the allure of the unknown. So please, big round of applause and for Adriana Marais.
So first, let me thank the organizers because this is a first. I've never come after a robot before. I don't know how that's going to work out for me, but I am going to take a quick selfie, Pepper, if you don't mind. We met in New York a couple of years ago. I don't know if you remember me. Hi. All right.
I do remember you, by the way.
Fantastic. Okay, so I'm a quantum physicist, and there are one or two things we're going to need to understand for me to begin with the rest of the presentation. So I hope you're able to see in the back, but in particular, equation 1.26, no, I'm kidding. I am a quantum physicist, but I think one of the most important take-homes that I've had from working in research is that, yes, we are going to have robotics and automation increasingly coming into our lives. So what is it that humans do in that scenario? And for me, that is asking the big questions, thinking beyond the current paradigm about what could be next. That involves imagination, that involves creativity, that involves passion, and that involves being brave enough to ask the truly big questions. So I've had the luxury of working in quantum physics and research to answer some of these questions from a scientific perspective, and we're not going to dive into any equations, don't worry about that. But I would like to take you on a brief history of the universe, because in order to have a vision of the future, we also have to look to the past and take some lessons from that. So let's start in the beginning. Did you know that 10% of your body is 13.8 billion years old? So how does that work? Maybe you're feeling a bit tired after days of conferencing, and maybe you agree. But in fact, the hydrogen that forms the water molecules, which we know forms more than half of our body, originated in the Big Bang. There is no other physical process by which hydrogen is created. So more than half of your body has the hydrogen atoms that have been around since the beginning of the universe. So this is a picture of as far back as we can see into time. That's the cosmic microwave background. And the clumpiness that you see there, those are those hydrogen and also helium atoms that were created in the very early periods of our universe, according to the mainstream theory of the Big Bang. So let's come a little bit closer to home. In some regions of galaxies near ours, we can in fact see things like amino acids. These are not hydrogen atoms, these involve more complexity, but we know these are the building blocks of protein. And these themselves have been found floating around in clouds, not on an Earth-like planet somewhere nearer to home, but far away in vast molecular clouds in very cold parts of space. It appears that amino acids, fundamental building blocks of proteins, have been able to form in the universe. So let's come even closer to home. What is another fundamental requirement for life? The matter, the energy that originated from the Big Bang, the molecules like amino acids that we see now forming in unusual parts of the galaxy, namely cold parts. When we come down to Earth, we see that the blue planet, of course, has a large amount of water on its surface, and this water not only forms a large part of our bodies, not only do we need to constantly drink it to stay alive, but the liquid itself, we believe, was important for the kind of interactions that happened between molecules, which resulted in the first living systems, we believe. Because in a gas, not enough happens. Things are too dilute, not enough molecules around. In a solid, not enough happens because it's too rigid. Things can't move around either. So a liquid in the water form on our planet, we assume, was an extremely important, played an extremely important role in the emergence of the first living systems. So I can answer the question right now, where do we come from, which is that we don't really know from a scientific perspective. What we do know are something about the origins of our matter, the origins of some of those molecules. But that transition point where the first living things started doing their functioning thing, which we'd call living, we don't have a lot of insights to. So what is the most important step we've made towards understanding where life came from is probably that all living systems contain DNA. And by that I mean all. You find a living organism, you investigate it on a sort of molecular level, you find DNA. When you develop techniques to look at the code in the individual components of the DNA strands, you see that huge chunks of this code are shared in common between bacteria, between plants, between humans. So this implies that we are one living system on Earth, terrestrial life. That's beautiful from the perspective of unity. We have a common origin, planet Earth. We rely on each other for resources. Our history is shared. Wonderful. However, from the perspective of trying to understand where we come from and what life is, this leaves us with a single data point, Earth, life on Earth. So if we are truly going to understand what other kinds of environments could host life, what kinds of life might emerge in other environments, and that would be to really understand who we are, would be to be able to compare life on Earth to some other life form, which we have not yet irrefutably detected. That brings me to the next question, which is, where are we going? And I think you can guess by the things I've said previously that it's a little bit further of a journey than any of us have ever done before. But let's start in the beginning. So humans are explorers by nature. We emerged in Central Eastern Africa around 200,000 years ago, according to the fossil record. And what's quite clear by the present day is that we cover most of the surface of the Earth. You might think you're exploring a new part of the world when you buy an airplane ticket somewhere, go on TripAdvisor to see which restaurants you might go to when you're there, go on Google Earth to see exactly what your hotel looks like. You probably chat to friends to see who's been there before. And that's where we are as modern humans in terms of exploration. Most of the surface of the land mass of Earth has been explored, and exploration of just a few hundred years ago, which is really nothing in the large scale of the universe, exploration had a very different character. And for example, my ancestors came in 1688 to Cape Town on a one-way trip from Europe. They were refugees escaping religious persecution in France. They brought the skills that they had and some seeds. They were agriculturalists, or peasant farmers in fact, made their way down to Cape Town and assisted the Dutch with setting up the agricultural systems at what was the Cape Colony at the time. And Plessis de Merle, unfortunately no longer in the family, was the area and the vineyard that was originally set up by the Marais family back in the late 1600s. So that's an example of a terrifying trip into the unknown. These people had never seen pictures, of course not videos or websites of the place that they were going to explore. This was exploration out of desperation, I would say. But all of us have examples of missions of exploration into the unknown in our family tree, whether it's our parents, grandparents, or much further back, because that's the nature of being human. We do move to new places, we do live there, and that's kind of what humans do. So this year, 2019, we are celebrating the 50th anniversary of the first moon landing. And this was arguably the boldest feat of exploration that humanity has ever achieved. But what does that mean for those of us who missed it? I was only born in the 80s, so I wasn't around. Does that mean I've missed the sort of pinnacle of human achievements narrowly? Or will we continue to explore? And so while this is a celebration of the 50th anniversary, it's also a sad moment in history to realize that the remaining 7 Apollo astronauts, who are all in their 80s, may not live to see the day, not only when we go back to the moon, but when we explore further than we managed to do in the 60s, when computing power was almost zero. Computing power was teams of, and if you've watched the movies, African-American women calculating how these orbits would be achieved. So that's where we are today, but I believe we will continue to explore further. And on this note, while we have not sent humans back to the moon since the 60s, and 1972 was in fact the last time we were there, developments in robotics and automation have enabled us to explore where humans have not gone. And the Curiosity rover, besides the internet, probably my favorite piece of equipment or technology, landed on Mars in 2012. This was the 7th successful landing by NASA on the surface of Mars. The 8th was the InSight mission, which landed recently looking for seismic activity. But the Curiosity rover has really driven our knowledge forward by such leaps and bounds in terms of what we can expect on the surface of our next-door neighbor planet Mars. So it's done measurements of the radiation levels, of the temperature, of the pressure, of the composition of the sand, the composition of the atmosphere. So in a nutshell, Mars is kind of a hostile desert at around negative 50 degrees, negative 50 to 60 degrees. It's not a whole lot colder than some parts of Earth. Negative 90 degrees Celsius is the coldest ever recorded temperature in Antarctica on Earth. With the 96% carbon dioxide in the atmosphere, this is of course a challenge. And the pressure is a huge challenge, being 1% of the pressure we're experiencing right now. Probably the funnest part about Mars is that the gravity is just 38% of the gravity we experience on Earth now. So hosting things like the Olympic Games on Mars could prove an exciting feat where people are able to jump 3 times higher and lift 3 times as much as they are on Earth, but that's another topic for another day. So, as a child, I dreamed of exploring not the solar system, but actually beyond the solar system. And I was then surprised to see that, although I'd missed the Apollo era, in 2013, I saw a call for volunteers for a one-way trip to Mars in the newspaper, not even online, in an actual newspaper. And suddenly I realized that, in fact, I hadn't missed it. I'd been born in the perfect era, because what has been enabled by the past few decades of automation and robotics and remote computing and being able to send equipment further than humans have ever been is enabling the next generation of crewed exploration, which I believe will happen in the next 10 to 20 years. So probably the most important technological development towards getting to Mars is the transport system. So our hope is in Elon Musk and having established his company SpaceX back in 2002 with the sole purpose of getting to Mars. So it's taken actually a South African moving from South Africa to the US to reinstate the dream to launch crew from the US again this year. In fact, no crew have been launched from the US for the last 10 years. SpaceX, in partnership with NASA, is testing the Dragon crew capsule this year to launch astronauts again to the space station later this year, if no other errors happen. But this is something else that SpaceX has done, which is to launch the Falcon Heavy. And the Falcon Heavy can lift up to 60 tons of cargo, which could have crew inside or just cargo. So this was the first ever launch of the Falcon Heavy, and it was successful in the first attempt, which even though we've been launching rockets for decades, is still a massive achievement. It's got several other great things about this launch, which you're going to see in a moment. So you're seeing the speed of stage 2 there, which is already approaching over 1,000 kilometers an hour. And this, what you're seeing now, is stage 1 separating from stage 2. So stage 1 are the boosters. They do the heavy lifting, containing the fuel, and really getting the rocket off the ground. And this, losing these, letting them burn up on re-entry, has been one of the most expensive parts of launching anything off of Earth. So what you're going to see now are the boosters being retrieved on Earth, and as Gwen Shotwell has said, this will reduce the cost of launch by more than 50%. There's a third aspect to this mission, which you're going to see in a moment, and that is, what is stage 2 then, doing almost 10,000 kilometers per hour. And that, in fact, is a rather special object, which is still in orbit around the sun, beyond Mars. This is Elon Musk's personal cherry red Tesla Roadster, which he launched beyond Mars to demonstrate that the Falcon Heavy can lift the capability of metric tons that it was proposed to, as well as launch something beyond Mars. So the only increment left is landing on Mars, which I'll talk about in a second. But what you're going to see here is not only was the car successfully launched beyond Mars, not only did the boosters separate successfully, but they've also been retrieved and landed in this beautiful moment of engineering back on Earth, perfectly synchronized to do minor repairs and be reused. So this will open up space, because not only SpaceX is focusing on this, but also Blue Origin, Jeff Bezos' company. If you're the richest person on Earth, why not start a rocket company? If you own a car company and a rocket company, why not launch your car into space? So I like the style and the demonstration. But the reusability will not only enable developing countries to launch more satellites into space. We see now how agriculture, water management, traffic control, all sorts of different aspects of overview of what's going on the ground are enabled by having satellites, all the way through to getting crew to Mars. By reducing the cost of leaving Earth, we're able to do more activities in space, whether that's space tourism. We've seen Virgin Galactic testing their first crafts to enable the average very rich person to buy a ticket to go into space, as well as several other things that have happened this year, including the SpaceX launch. So the transport system, and people always ask me about dates. So the Mars One project is just a crew selection and training company, a startup at that. We've experienced financial issues since the beginning because we don't have Jeff Bezos or Elon Musk supporting our project. So if you want to know dates, 2022, SpaceX will attempt to land on the surface of Mars. Not a hard landing, as Israel achieved on the moon recently. That was an amazing effort from a private company to attempt to land something on the moon, but a soft landing, so-called, which would be a successful landing on Mars, will be attempted by SpaceX in 2022. And if that succeeds, Elon wants to put crew on the next mission. So we can assume a date before 2030 is not unrealistic when the first departure of humans from Earth will attempt to reach the surface of Mars. So assuming we survive takeoff, assuming we survive the 6-month journey there in conditions not unlike being in the space station, so spending 6 months in a transit shuttle on the way to Mars, very comparable to what the astronauts would do in the space station. So this part is in fact not the most dangerous part. Landing then is. We've never landed more than a Curiosity rover-sized object on the size of Mars, and for inches sake, that's like a big car. So we're looking at a handful of tons at most. We're going to need to add a 0 onto that. So an order of magnitude improvements in the landing gear to get the crew onto Mars. But of course, we'll send a whole bunch, tons of equipment before the humans even leave, thus testing the whole architecture, using the Falcon Heavy, the same transit vehicle and the same landing gear. So the most important thing that we'll transport is, of course, power, so solar panels. We're not going to go nuclear as of yet. That hasn't been incorporated into the Mars One plans. Wind turbines are not going to be effective because the pressure is so low. So we're left with solar as a major option, and the radiation levels on the surface of Mars with a very thin atmosphere are significant. We can calculate how many square meters of thin film photovoltaics we need based on measurements from the Curiosity rover of the average sunlight. So we transport those, roll them out with remote-controlled rovers, and start to generate however many kilowatts we need for the settlement before the humans even leave Earth. Next most important element, water. So water not only provides, obviously, the drinking and sanitation requirements for humans, but watering the plants, and hydrogen, basis of fuel, whether it's hydrogen fuel cells or whether it's rocket fuel. Oxygen, the molecule that we, of course, need to breathe. So back to basics, right? Before life on Earth began, we had our sun as a power injection. Before that, we had our oceans. And just like that on Mars, when you want to establish life somewhere, you're going to go through the same set of steps. First power, next water. I should say that's a picture of how Mars looked around 4 billion years ago. So Mars had oceans as far as we can tell. There are shorelines, there are canyons, there are pebbles, all features that we cannot understand geologically unless there were bodies of water flowing there. Clearly there's not water anymore. This is an artist's impression. It's now a sandy desert, iron oxide, giving it that red color, which is rust, essentially. But what we are lucky to find from the Curiosity rover is that around 2 to 3% of the sand is actually H2O ice crystals. So put your bulldozer or forklift sort of attachments onto the rover, dig up tons of sand every day, heat it, condense that water, purify it, and then manage that water, as in reuse that water. So wastewater management will be a huge aspect of trying to survive on Mars, and I don't need to tell you that the kinds of technologies I'm talking about now are, yes, absolutely critical for Mars, but guess what? Absolutely critical for Earth. And if we can demonstrate a solar-powered, water-efficient community 200 million kilometers away from Earth in a desert, -50, then there's no longer an excuse for running out of water at a city with 2 oceans. I think solar-powered desalination or solar-powered water management systems, whether it's wastewater management or removing salt, is going to have to be the way forward. With current rates of urbanization, water is not going to become more abundant. We need to get smarter, and technologies to do that do exist. Next, agriculture. So photosynthesis was one of the first living systems to have emerged on Earth. Humans and plants have lived side by side for obvious reasons through the duration of human history. It will be no different on another planet. We can't yet 3D print all of our nutrition requirements, so we'll bring seeds, not unlike my ancestors, taking seeds to establish agriculture at the place where the new community will be built. So this may look familiar because, of course, there are companies on Earth already implementing such solutions, and I believe for Africa, with the highest rates of urbanization on Earth, this kind of farming setup for urban centers is going to be absolutely crucial. Again, if we can do it on Mars, no excuse for Earth. This kind of setup uses 95% less water than traditional outdoor agriculture because you're collecting all the drip-off and recycling it through the system. You don't use pesticides. Obviously, it's a controlled indoor environment, so fully organic. The lighting conditions, the frequency, the intensity, the duration of the summer conditions, winter conditions, you can machine learn all of these for your rocket, your peas, whatever that species may be, and make the most efficient generation of nutrition out of the least resources possible. So this kind of mindset is absolutely necessary for space, but guess what? With current rates of overpopulation on Earth, this is the kind of thinking that space will get us thinking about, and that's the dual benefit of really space exploration, is thinking about technologies like this and how we can build them on our rooftop or in our basement, and reduce transportation costs of getting food to communities, putting it in an elevator and releasing it to retail at street level. The future, whatever planet we're on. So efficient manufacturing, and this is a 3D printer that's been demonstrated in the space station. So gravitational changes in gravitational fields are not going to affect the kind of 3D printers we hope to bring, whether it's space, which is 0 gravity, or whether it's Mars, which is 38% gravity of Earth. We hope to be able to extract natural resources, whether it's from the surface sand of Mars or more further afield, like the asteroid belt, which lies just beyond Mars, where you can find tons of platinum, other minerals, water, you name it. The asteroid belt is a rich source of resources, again, whatever planet we're on. So efficient manufacturing in terms of looking at molecular level, whether it's in China printing low-cost housing, whether it's printing prosthetic sort of bones or limbs even coming up soon, this is going to be the future, to make tailor-made, highly efficient manufacturing systems and food to bio to construction. So as I said, resources. On Mars, we don't plan to copy-paste terrestrial mining techniques and digging big holes in the surface of planets. It's in fact much easier to just go pick rocks out of vacuum. Iponing, deepest mine on Earth, at several kilometers deep. I think it's definitely a more difficult task to retrieve platinum from down there than it would be to fly through vacuum, pluck a rock out of vacuum, remove the platinum on site through various space mining techniques, which I don't have time to go into now, and deliver that resource to the surface of whatever planet the humans need that resource at. So I've been through two of the questions, where do we come from and where are we going? But perhaps the most important one of all is what are we doing now? And let me refer to this picture, which I'm so glad I took in the beginning of the talk, because the girl in the front with the yellow t-shirt had her hand up my whole talk. This was in the beginning. She didn't put her hand down the whole way through the talk. I kept telling her I'll first for your question, but she had her hand up the whole time. Anyway, at the end, she asked me, and she stood up finally at the end and said, so you've told us that the Big Bang made the universe, but we've heard that God made the universe. So which one is right? And I could see the teachers in the back looking extremely nervous about how I was going to handle this. So I said, the honest truth is, nobody knows. Maybe God made the universe. Maybe the Big Bang made the universe. Maybe God made the Big Bang. I said, the beautiful part about it is that you get to decide for yourself. And as long as you're the kind of person who keeps asking those big questions, and that's the most difficult question I've ever been asked in an audience, I must be honest, especially in front of the teachers. So to ask those big questions, and I think when we're 10 years old, it's easy because we just say what comes to mind. And perhaps our minds are the most curious, I don't know that they'll ever be at age sort of 10, when we start experiencing the world and being able to use our language to ask these questions. But I think that's part of us that we can't let go of. And that's back to the thing I stated in the beginning, that the people are going to be the ones who take a step back, examine the current paradigm, examine what information has just been given to them, and think beyond it and ask the truly big questions. And I've left out all references to people during this talk. You probably noticed I've just shown the robotics and the science. People often think, engineers and scientists are kind of decoupled from, the rest of humanity, let's say, in terms of the emotions and what it really means to be human. But the imagination, the passion, and the curiosity, these are an intrinsic part of doing what was thought to be unimpossible that can be enabled through science and technology. So perhaps the story, and of course this is the tip of the iceberg in terms of the people who've been involved in the projects that I've mentioned so far. Maybe a mention of the Apollo era, since we're in the 50th anniversary. During the Apollo era, an unprecedented number of students enrolled in science, technology, engineering, and mathematics PhDs in the US. Because these children, whether they were in high school or undergrads at the time, watched or listened on the radio to humans walking on the moon, the impossible being achieved through science and technology, and decided they would study science and technology and try to change the world. And arguably they did, because there's research from more than one different research group that shows this same cohort of students went on to commercialize the personal computer, the mobile phone, and the internet. And if we think carefully, have we really evolved very far from these three technologies? The internet, the personal computer, and the mobile phone. Yes, we've made them better. Yes, we've made them smaller. Yes, we put cameras on them. But essentially, those fundamental functionalities emerged out of the Apollo era because of inspiration. And this is what I would argue is the greatest part and reason why we explore, is to inspire bigger thinking, new ways of thinking, imagining what can be possible beyond the current paradigm. So this is the Mars 100. You can find out about us online. We are medics, emergency surgeons with zero gravity training. We are training as commercial astronauts in the US and the UK. We are researchers in the origins of life, like myself, in planetary science, geology, etc. And we hope to be amongst some of the first people on Mars. So I think to end off with, who am I then, as I've left off, the people? We're all people. We're all living in this era. We can all learn from the past as well as have a vision for the future. But I think listening carefully to that voice inside us, listening to our curiosity, our childlike voice that's asking those questions, being passionate about things, not listening to others who say it's not possible. We're living in an era where through robotics, automation, technology, internet, we are able to really achieve what would have been impossible just a few years ago through technology. And so whether or not you would Photoshop your face into Elon Musk's car, imagining your future zooming around the solar system or beyond, I'm not sure what your passions are and what you have as your vision of the future. But what I do know is that each and every single one of us should carefully consider the role we are playing in this era, because far from it that this era is technologically enabled and will continue with or without our input. It's our responsibility at this very crucial time in human history to really make careful decisions about how we are contributing to the kind of future we want to arrive at, because with all of our contributions, I know we can create a proudly human future, whatever planet we're living on. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Adriana.